The day I drove back to my hometown, I had exactly one bag in the trunk, $63 in my checking account, and a 7-year-old beagle named Biscuit sitting in the passenger seat like he owned the road. I didn't call ahead. I didn't need to. That house had been my home for 31 years. I still knew the code to the garage, still knew my mother kept a spare key under the clay pot by the back step. I thought that meant something. I was wrong. My name is Lorraine. I was 42 years old, a registered nurse who had spent the last 14 months working in a travel nursing contract in rural Montana. 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week, a staff-to-patient ratio that would make most hospital administrators cry into their coffee. I had taken the contract because my husband Mitchell, had asked me to. He said we needed the money. He said we were behind on the mortgage. He said if I could just do this one thing, this one hard thing, we could finally get ahead. I believed him. I always believed him. Mitchell and I had been married for 11 years. We met at a 4th of July party at a mutual friend's place in Columbus, Ohio, and he had this way of looking at you like you were the only person in the room. I was 29. I thought I was the luckiest woman alive. So I packed my bags and drove to Montana with Biscuit, and I called home every Sunday, and I worked until my feet ached and my eyes burned, and I sent money back every single month. $4,000, sometimes more. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself we were building something. What Mitchell was actually building was a whole other life. I found out on a Tuesday in early April. My facility supervisor had miscalculated my remaining contract weeks and told me I was free to leave 2 weeks earlier than expected. I didn't call Mitchell. I thought I'd surprise him. 14 months is a long time. I wanted to see his face when I walked through the door. I drove 31 hours over 2 days, stopping only for gas and to let Biscuit do his business at rest stops along I-90. I was tired in a way that lives in your bones. But I was also something close to happy. I had a cashier's check for $8,000 in my purse, the last of what I'd saved after sending Mitchell his portions every month. I thought we were going to be okay. I pulled into our driveway at 7:30 in the morning. There was a car in my spot, a white Honda Civic I had never seen before. I sat in my truck for a moment. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe Mitchell had bought a car. Maybe a friend was crashing with him. Biscuit pressed his nose against the window and left a smudge on the glass. I got out and used my key. The house smelled like someone else's perfume and scrambled eggs. I stood in my own kitchen doorway, and I looked at my husband standing at my stove in his bathrobe, and I looked at the woman sitting at my kitchen table in my chair, drinking from my coffee mug, wearing what I could only describe as a very small t-shirt, and Mitchell turned around and his face did something I had never seen it do before. It collapsed. Not with guilt, with calculation. Even in that first second I could see it, his mind working, searching for the angle for the thing to say. "Lorraine," he said, "this isn't what you think." I didn't say anything. I put my purse on the counter. I went upstairs. I packed another bag. I came back downstairs. Mitchell was talking the whole time, explaining, redirecting, reframing, but I had gone somewhere very quiet inside myself, somewhere past the reach of his words. I called Biscuit, who had been sniffing cautiously around the woman's feet. He came immediately. He always did. I walked out the front door. Mitchell followed me onto the porch. He grabbed my arm. "You're not being reasonable," he said. I looked at his hand on my arm. I looked at his face. I said, "Don't call me." I drove to a gas station 2 miles away, and I sat in the parking lot for 45 minutes. I didn't cry. I was too far past crying. I called my mother. She answered on the 3rd ring, and I told her what had happened, and I told her I needed to come home for a little while, just a few weeks, just until I could figure out my next step. There was a pause. "Mitchell called me this morning," my mother said. I went very still. "He said you'd been acting erratic, that you'd been drinking." She said the word carefully, like she was picking it up with tongs. "He said he was worried about you." "Mom," I said. "I just walked in on him with another woman in our house." Another pause, longer this time. "He said you've been struggling since Montana, that the stress." "Mom." "He said you might say something like this." He said. I hung up. I sat there in that gas station parking lot for another 20 minutes. Biscuit put his head in my lap and I stared at the windshield and I thought, very clearly, he called her before I even got to the highway. Mitchell had known I was coming home, not the specific day but soon. He'd known the contract was ending, and he had gotten ahead of it. He had spent months, maybe longer, slowly planting seeds, little comments to my family about my stress, about how hard the distance had been on me, about how worried he was. He had built a story before I could tell mine. I drove to my parents' house anyway. I didn't know where else to go. I knocked on the front door, the same door I'd gone in and out of my whole childhood, the one with the little brass knocker my father had installed when I was 9, and my mother opened it partway. She didn't open it all the way. "You can't bring the dog," she said. "You know your father's allergies." "Mom, please. Lorraine, I think you need to calm down before we talk. I think you need to go somewhere and get some rest and—" My father appeared behind her. He looked at me for a long moment. He looked at Biscuit. He said, "Give Mitchell a chance to explain." I stood on that porch for what felt like a very long time. The morning was cold the way Ohio April mornings are cold. The kind that doesn't care that it's technically spring. I had one bag. I had a beagle. I had $63 and a cashier's check I hadn't told anyone about. My mother started to close the door. I put my hand on it, not to push it open, just to feel it close against my palm. "I worked 14 months, I said. I sent home almost $50,000. She looked uncomfortable. "Mitchell said there were expenses." "I'm your daughter," I said. She said, "We just need some time to understand what happened." I took my hand off the door. I walked back to my truck. I put Biscuit on the seat. I sat down. I looked at the house I grew up in, at the window of the bedroom that used to be mine, at the clay pot by the back step with the spare key underneath it. I thought about all the Christmases and Thanksgivings and Sunday dinners. I thought about the way my mother used to check on me at night when I was little, opening the door just an inch to make sure I was still breathing. I started the truck. I drove. I ended up at a motel on the east side of Columbus that accepted pets for a $20 deposit. The room had orange carpet and a heating unit that clicked every 4 minutes like a metronome. I put Biscuit on the bed and I took the cashier's check out of my purse, and I set it on the nightstand and I stared at it. $8,000, that was what I had. That was the total sum of 14 months of 60-hour weeks and freeze-dried meals and Sunday calls home and Montana winters. I needed to understand what I was dealing with. I called my bank the next morning. I asked them to pull the last 14 months of account activity on the joint checking account where I'd been sending Mitchell's monthly payments. The account representative had a flat, careful voice. She went through the transactions with me, and as she talked, I started writing things down in the little motel notepad with the pen chained to the desk. Mitchell had been spending about $6,200 a month. Our mortgage was $1,900. Utilities, groceries, car insurance, even at generous estimates, that left roughly $2,000 a month unaccounted for. "Can you tell me if any credit cards were opened under this account in the last year?" I asked. She put me on hold. When she came back, she told me that 2 credit cards had been opened under my name and social security number in the past 11 months. Combined balance, $41,000. I wrote down the number, I stared at it. Then I called my brother. My brother Franklin is 2 years younger than me and has never, in his entire life, backed down from anything. When we were kids and a neighbor's dog bit me, Franklin went and knocked on that neighbor's door at age 9 and told them they needed to fix their fence. I have always loved this about him. Franklin didn't pick up. He texted me 40 minutes later. "Mitchell told us you were having a breakdown. I think you should call a doctor." "I'm sorry, Lorraine. This isn't a good time." I read that text 3 times. Then I called my friend Teresa, who I had worked with for 8 years before I left for Montana. Teresa answered on the first ring, said, "Oh honey, where are you?" and showed up at the motel 45 minutes later with a bag of groceries and a look on her face like she was ready to go to war. I told her everything. Teresa is not a dramatic person. She doesn't gasp or throw her hands up. She sat across from me at the orange-carpeted motel room, and she listened with her arms folded and her jaw set, and when I finished, she said, "You need a lawyer, today if possible." "I need to know what he did first." "Lorraine," she said, "you already know what he did. Now you need someone whose job it is to care." She was right. She usually is. I found a family law attorney named Eleanor Marsh, through a referral from Teresa's cousin, who had been through a divorce 2 years earlier. Eleanor had an office on the north side of Columbus with diplomas on the wall and a tissue box on the corner of her desk that had clearly been through some things. She looked at the motel notepad I'd been writing on and she asked me 3 questions, and then she said, "The credit cards opened in your name. Do you still have the letters they would have sent? They would have gone to the house. Then that's our first request in discovery. If your signature was forged, we're looking at identity theft, credit fraud, and potentially fraud given the amounts crossed state lines." She paused. "How long were you in Montana?" 14 months. She wrote something down. And your family is currently not speaking to you based on information he provided? Yes. Eleanor nodded slowly. She didn't look surprised. She looked like someone who had seen this particular shape of thing before and knew exactly where all the edges were. Here's what I need you to do, she said. Don't contact Mitchell. Don't contact your family right now. Let me send the initial requests. And I need you to write down everything you remember. Dates, amounts, conversations, everything. I spent that night in the motel room with the clicking heater and Biscuit's warm weight against my leg and the motel notepad filling up with my own handwriting. Dates, amounts, the Sunday calls, the things Mitchell had said about expenses, about setbacks, about needing just a little more time. I wrote until almost 2 in the morning. 3 weeks passed. I found a sublet through Teresa's network. Spare room, a duplex in Westerville, owned by a retired schoolteacher named Marguerite, who had 3 cats and no opinion about beagles. Biscuit and Marguerite's cats reached a diplomatic agreement within 48 hours that involved a lot of sniffing and 1 territorial hiss, and then nothing further. I paid Marguerite $800 a month out of the cashier's check, and I picked up per diem nursing shifts at a hospital 20 minutes away, and I filed the paperwork Eleanor sent me and I waited. I didn't call my mother. I didn't call Franklin. I didn't call Mitchell. I thought about them all the time. That's the thing nobody tells you about being cut off by people you love. It's not clean. You don't just stop caring. You wake up at 3 in the morning, thinking about your brother's stupid text and wanting to call him and scream, and also wanting to know if he's okay. You drive past restaurants you used to go to with your mother and feel it like pressure behind your sternum. It doesn't go away just because they hurt you. Eleanor called me in early June. The forensic accountant finished the preliminary review, she said. Your signature was forged on both credit card applications. The handwriting analysis is unambiguous. A pause. He also appears to have filed a joint tax return last year using income projections that don't match your actual earnings from the travel contract. That's a separate issue. We'll be referring to the appropriate channels. I was sitting on the small porch at Marguerite's duplex with Biscuit in my lap. The evening was warm. A neighbor was mowing their lawn somewhere down the block. Okay, I said. Lorraine, Eleanor said. He's going to try to settle before this goes further. I want you to be prepared for that. What does that look like? It looks like an offer that sounds significant and is actually designed to make this go away as quietly as possible. I want you to let me handle it. Okay, I said again. I sat on that porch for a long time after I hung up. Biscuit had fallen asleep. The lawnmower had stopped. The street was very quiet. I thought about the day Mitchell and I had bought our house. How we'd stood in the empty living room before we'd moved a single piece of furniture in, and he had put his arm around my shoulders and said, "We're going to build something real here." I had believed him so completely. I had built my whole life around that belief. You have to grieve the thing you thought you had, even when the thing you thought you had turned out to be a lie. You don't get to skip that part. I cried for a while on that porch. And then I went inside and made dinner and watched half a procedural drama with Marguerite and went to bed. The settlement offer came in July. Eleanor called me at 9 in the morning and read it to me with the tone of someone reading a menu item they do not recommend. Mitchell was offering to sign the house over to me. The house with a mortgage that was 11 months behind, and accept responsibility for one of the 2 credit cards in exchange for a full release of any civil claims. He would retain the joint savings account, which Eleanor noted had been drawn down to approximately $400. He wants me to take the house that's almost in foreclosure, I said. Yes, and one of the 2 maxed credit cards that are in my name. Yes, and he keeps the savings. Eleanor, I said. I know, she said. I've drafted a counter. The counter was not gentle. Eleanor was not a gentle woman when the situation did not call for gentleness. The proceedings took 4 months. I won't walk you through all of it because some of it is genuinely tedious, and some of it I don't entirely want to revisit. What I will tell you is that by November, a judge had signed an order requiring Mitchell to take full legal responsibility for both credit card debts, repay a portion of what had been taken from our joint account during the 14 months I was in Montana, and pay my attorney's fees. The house went back to the bank. I didn't want it anyway. I also won't tell you that the moment I walked out of the courthouse, I felt triumphant. I felt tired. I felt the particular exhaustion of someone who has been fighting for a long time and has finally been allowed to put down the weight. I went home to Marguerite's duplex and I sat on the porch, and Biscuit put his head in my lap and I told him it was over. He licked my hand. He had been doing that for 15 years, through moves and bad days and long shifts and the kind of loneliness that doesn't announce itself. He just kept doing his job. Here is the thing about the rest. My brother Franklin called me in October before the proceedings ended. He didn't text. He called, and when I answered he was quiet for a moment and then he said, "I looked into it. Okay, Theresa called me. She sent me some documents. He stopped. Lorraine, I should have called you back in April. I should have listened. I didn't say it was okay because it wasn't. Not yet." "I know," I said. Franklin came over the following Saturday. He brought coffee and he sat at Marguerite's kitchen table and he told me what Mitchell had said to the family. All of it, in detail, so I could understand the shape of what had been done. The calls before I even left Montana. The careful escalation of concern. The way Mitchell had cried at my parents' house in March, 2 weeks before I came home, telling them he was worried I was going to come back unstable, that the stress of the travel contract had changed me. "He cried," I said. "He cried," Franklin said. I thought about that for a moment. "He's very good," I said finally. "He is," Franklin said. "I'm sorry I wasn't better." My mother called in November, 3 days after the court order was signed. She had heard. I don't know how. Small family networks have their own gravity. But she had heard. She said, "I should have let you in." I said, "Yes." She said, "Can I come see you?" I thought about the door closing against my palm. I thought about the clay pot with the spare key. I thought about my mother checking on me at night when I was little, opening the door just an inch. "Not yet," I said. "But call me next week." She did. We talked for 40 minutes. It wasn't easy. But it was a beginning, and I have learned over this past year to take beginnings where I find them. I am writing this from my apartment. A real one now, my own lease. A 2-bedroom in a building in Columbus that allows pets under 30 pounds. Biscuit is technically 31 pounds, and the building manager has made an executive decision not to own a scale. I have a job I love, working in a pediatric clinic 3 days a week and picking up weekend shifts at a trauma center when I want extra hours. I have Theresa, who showed up with groceries and stayed. I have Franklin, who is learning to be the brother he should have been. I have Marguerite, who texts me pictures of her cats approximately every 3rd day. I am not going to tell you that what Mitchell did didn't change me. It did. I am more careful now. I am more aware of the gap between what people say and what they're doing behind the words. I don't think that's a bad thing, although I won't pretend it wasn't a hard way to learn it. Here's what I think about more, though. I think about the morning I drove back from that courthouse, and I stopped at a diner on the outskirts of Columbus, and I ordered eggs and coffee, and the waitress, a woman maybe 60, with the kind of steadiness that comes from having stood on her feet for 40 years, looked at Biscuit sitting patiently in the truck window in the parking lot and said, "Is that your dog?" "Yes," I said. She smiled. "He's waiting for you like you hung the moon." I looked out at Biscuit. His tail was going, his ears were up. He was watching the diner door like I might disappear if he stopped. I thought about all the Sunday nights in Montana when I'd cried into his fur while he pretended not to notice. I thought about the motel with the orange carpet and the clicking heater, and every per diem shift, and every document Eleanor had put in front of me to sign. I thought about how, through every single piece of it, Biscuit had just kept looking at me like I was worth looking at. Sometimes that's the thing that holds you. Not the triumph, not the outcome. Just the fact that something that loves you kept believing in you while you figured out how to believe in yourself again. I left the diner a good tipper. I always do. I got back in the truck. Biscuit climbed across the console and sat on my lap, all 31 inconvenient pounds of him, and I let him, even though he blocked the steering wheel and my visibility was approximately terrible. And I sat in that parking lot in the thin November sun, and I held on to my dog and I let myself feel, for the first time in a very long time, like I was going to be okay. I was.